to the Duchess's Dinner Party, a podcast all about hit social deduction game, Blood on the Clock Tower, and the distinguished opinions of its players. Joining myself, Mia Gwen, in visiting the Duchess tonight, my first guest has read the same novel over 100 times. It's JC. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and where people might know you from.
Hi, I'm JC, aka James, if you want to use my human name. I've been on too many streams, just too many streams. Mia and I also made an Only Connect series based around Blood on the Clock Tower, which you can see on YouTube if you search JC Whammer, the channel there. That's where it's hosted. I think that's about it, really.
My second guest ate their first grape at the age of 26. It's George. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and where people might know you from.
Hello, thank you for having me. If you spent any time in the Clock Tower streaming circuit over the last couple of years, you'll probably have found me somewhere, either on TPI or Patter's channel, Arif's or Niz's. I can also be found usually playing monthly in person at the Bless in Derby or some of the UK cons. And I can be found in Patter's Discord server, where I'm in charge of the daily music recommendation service, Pals FM.
It is very good, Pals FM.
Hell yeah.
JC, would you like to go first and share your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. So my opinion is that people pay significantly, like not just a bit, but significantly, they pay too much attention to what mechanical information they have and not enough attention to how the players are behaving as humans. So I was having this chat with Austin, for those who watch Confirmed Good, one member of that, and we basically came to the conclusion that if you're watching a stream, say, and it's a player perspective game, and you hop into it at Final 3, most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, if you haven't had the context of anything that's happened in the game, you can basically tell which player is probably the demon if you just watch for like a minute. And it's because everyone in the game is behaving based on the context of everything that's come before it in the game. Whereas if you just come into it at Final 3 and just pay attention to how people are behaving, you're like, oh, that person seems like they're the demon because of how other players are defending them and so on. And I played a game last night at the time of recording, and I thought to myself, this player is very probably the demon. However, the information says that they're not. There is a fortune teller who has a no on them, and there is multiple pieces of information making this other player look suspicious. And I spent my dead vote on the player that the information said that I was meant to spend my dead vote on, and they were the saint, and we lost. And the person I thought was shifty, who had a fortune teller no on them, was the demon. That's my hot take, is that actually information just gets in the way. Just ignore it.
My first response is this is a Clock Tower podcast, not a werewolf podcast.
I mean, this is often true, I feel like. Not always, but often. I think you're absolutely right to say that at the Final 3, sometimes it is time to throw the information in the bin. Or at the very least, attempt to divorce yourself from it a second and read the room before trying to plug the information back into what you're seeing. I think where the information comes in handy at the Final 3, beyond the obvious nature of how it got you in the first place, is as a decision maker when you're not clear on the socials. Normally, I will vote with what I feel like the socials are pointing to at that stage. Because, Clock Tower never stops surprising us with the ways in which it undermines certain kinds of information. But if it's genuinely not clear, then obviously you go with the information the game is trying to tell you. But I think you're right to say that there can always be lies, there can always be poisonings and misinformation, and a lot of the time, the way it feels, certainly for players who've played a lot of games of Clock Tower, where you've got this kind of instinctive understanding of what you would do in certain situations and how other people respond to certain situations. That gut instinct is a finely trained organ, That's not how analogies work. But it's a real thing.
Don't you train
like,
your organs?
Yeah, I said it and I meant it, and you can all go away.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point. I'm probably making this take with the benefit of playing a lot of games with the same group of people. I notice that my radar for who is good and who is evil is significantly worse when I'm playing with people I don't know as well, which makes sense. And at that point, I think mechanical information is more useful. I also think that mechanical information is very, very useful up until the end of the game. I do want to make that clear. I don't want to make it sound like it's werewolf. But usually, not always, but usually if you get to Final 3, the evil team has done a very good job of distorting the makeup of the mechanical information in some way. And at that point is when I disregard it a bit more. But certainly, I'm not going, well, I've got these 3 days of savant information, but nah, fuck it.
Yeah, I think there you address the two things I was going to ask about. Is one, I think that playing in a consistent group allows you to have those more consistent reads on people. I think you use the example of watching a stream and it's Final 3, and if you watch for a minute, you'll figure out who the demon is. I think if you were to just instead, let's say, walk into a random board game cafe and they were playing some Clock Tower and it was a Final 3, I think you'd potentially struggle a lot more with going, oh, this player's the demon, if you didn't know everyone, which I think you addressed. And then secondly as well, your point about that, sure, this might apply in Final 3, but I don't think it holds true for the rest of the game as much.
Yeah, no, definitely. And information, regardless of how much I think you should trust it at the end of a game, it's still really, really useful for seeing how people react to that information.
I think this can maybe speak to how we reevaluate our assumptions as the game goes on, how we like check and recheck information as the game progresses, and it's a good like that walking into Final 3 and seeing what's going on devoid of context is a good reminder that like most of us playing in a game can't turn off the context, or it's really difficult to do that. Like you've been there for an hour and a half and you've got all these things built up, but it is a good skill to work on, which is to mentally shake off as many of your assumptions as you can and try to like blank slate it all over again, and that can be a useful impulse to follow.
I think this also speaks to I do think that socials are more important in the Final 3 than like earlier in a game, if that makes sense. In that I've often had games where either I'm evil and I get to the Final 3 and I've set someone up to be the frame, all the mechanical information points there, and then something triggers in them realizing they're about to lose the game, and all of a sudden they read really socially good and Town don't want to kill them. And that just wasn't there before, and maybe that is Town being more aware of social things in Final 3. There's also potentially just a lot more attention on players in Final 3 as opposed to Final 9. Like you don't have the bandwidth to monitor every single player in a Final 9, for lack of better.
That's a really good point. Yeah, you have a limit on how many people you can gauge the probability of them currently being the demon at, and it's just not worth the mental capacity when there's still 9. And unless you're playing a particularly interesting BMR setup, you really don't need to worry about it yet.
I mean, I think I'd push back on that a little bit, just in the sense of, like, you mentioned earlier, Casey, the, like, looking at how other people are interacting with these people in the Final 3, like, who wants to vote for who's pushing whom. On that sense, you're still monitoring a very similar number of players as you are when there were 9 alive. You're just focusing on who is pushing what world rather than who wants to not die, although obviously that is a very key element of it. It maybe focuses those energies a bit more on the kinds of things you're looking from certain players. Obviously, in a sense, like if there's pressure on the demon when there's 9 or 10 alive, you know inherently it's going to be easier to shrug off or move without your team going up in flames, and that safety net disappears at Final 3. So the intensity of reaction maybe goes up, but I think you still do have to read the whole circle and not just the Final 3.
I think that's true, but I think you're reading the whole circle only in the context of 3 people rather than in the context of the whole circle.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
That's fair. Yeah, I definitely think it is true that this was much more applicable the more you know people. Like socials in general are much more valuable when you have a social framework that you can fall back on with those people. And yeah, Clock Tower feels very, very differently when you're playing it with people you played 100 times than when you played it 0 times.
Established metas are very much a thing.
It's the whenever I play with a new group, it takes about 50 games for them to sort of just stop executing me day one every time because of how I
shocked to learn
play.
this.
Yeah.
But good on you for absolutely not modifying your behaviour whatsoever. I like that.
They will bend to me, not the other way around.
I enjoy how I play Clock Tower. I think that, like if
Yeah, no, that's valid.
fundamentally, if I'm not vibing with a group, then I won't go to that group. But I think if I'm vibing enough with a group, and of course if the group is vibing with me, etc., there's like a whole other topic on socials and like group dynamics there. But yeah, once
You should invite someone who has a strong opinion onto this, because I would love to listen to you and someone who can present that as their opinion. I think you could get an entire episode's worth of content out of just that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think you also just need to know the players to be able to make that social read. And even then, I think that perhaps it's I'm not going to say a recency bias here, but we potentially negativity bias where we remember losses more than we remember wins. So you probably remember, for example, that loss that you mentioned where you voted with the information instead of the social more than you remember a win where you probably went with the information as opposed to the social.
That does make sense. I think oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, if you win because of information, in my experience, you win earlier than Final 3. It's just, like, the fortune teller sniped the demon knight 1, that sort of thing that leads it. I think more often than not, when you get to Final 3, the evil team have muddied the information enough that you have to fall back on the socials. Whereas I think, yeah, where the information is unmuddywithable, that's when the game ends early.
I think sometimes it's a case of the evil team hasn't been caught in information early enough to end it before Final 3, if that makes sense.
Sometimes, certainly sometimes.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah. None of this is a blanket statement about every single game, of course.
But I think it's fair to say that the games where the information has gone against the evil team are the games that are more likely to end early, and the games where the socials start badly for the evil team are the ones where they might go the distance regardless.
Yeah, I mean, other than, stuff like Damsel or Saint or Mastermind or whatever, sort of by definition for the game to be going well for the evil team, it has to reach Final 3. Whereas if it's going poorly for the evil team, it could end at any.
So I would like to talk about the Zealot today. My opinion is that the Zealot would be a more satisfying character if it leaned harder into being the antithesis of the Butler. Now, I think it's good that the Zealot exists. I think it's exploring like very valuable design space. Like the whole suite of Outsiders is intended to exploit simple things about the way that the mechanics of the game work most of the time. And voting is a big part of the game. There should be multiple Outsiders that deal with voting. But the way that the Zealot is currently written frustrates me on 3 levels. And I'd like to fix all of them with a little tweak to it. So the first way in which it frustrates me is the player agency angle. And this is a great comparison for the Butler. The Butler chooses a player every night, and they can only vote if that person is also voting. This is obviously extremely restrictive for the Butler, but it gives them an opportunity to interact with another player and put their heads together and figure out who they both want to vote for, and create sort of social connections in that way. It's mechanically and socially interactive. The Zealot, on the other hand, has no such release. They're just cursed to vote for everything all the time. This is obviously kind of a frustrating position to be in, because you're forced to go along with plans that the evil team want, and you can't emphasize your own preference for certain executions over others, except through talking about it. But if a nomination happens, you've got to vote for it. And there's no way to exploit that, or to exploit is the wrong word, but there's no way to get around that and to find ways to work with the restriction. It's just a blanket effect, which can be frustrating for a lot of people. My second angle of frustration with the Zealot is how it restricts a good Zealot's ability to hide that they are the Zealot. This is definitely a playstyle dependent concern. Certain people will get more out of the skullduggery of hiding their true role from the evil team, engaging in role swaps, or just generally lying because lying is fun. And there's a spectrum of that, and there's a whole different ways you can engage with lying about what you are as a good player. But the Zealot broadly removes that as a possibility. It's not impossible, but it mostly requires the rest of the town not to be paying attention for you to have a chance of getting away with pretending to be anything other than the Zealot. The Zealot's ability is annoying to use, and you have to do it. So, and the more nominations there are during the day, it increases the chances so much of people being completely aware that you are exactly and specifically the Zealot. So that can be frustrating if you're the sort of player who wants to leave ambiguity as to what they are for whatever reason. This is especially true on Fangu scripts, where if you get traced as being the Zealot, that can have extremely problematic consequences for your hopes of winning the game if you are jumped by the Fangu. That makes you very traceable, which is a problem for both teams, depending on who the Zealot ends up playing for. But this is kind of mirrored in the experience of bluffing the Zealot as an evil team, which in practice happens very little. I've seen it done occasionally to good effect, but it's very, very difficult to do because you have to commit to it so early, and it's a restriction that, unlike some of the other outsider bluffs, hurts the evil team as much as it hurts the good team. Most outsider abilities are implicative of their downside rather than certain. It's, there might be some misinformation because of the Puzzle Master ability. There might be a doubt thrown, some misalignment because of the Moonchild or the Klutz. The Zealot only really hurts your team, and if you want to bluff being the Zealot, you basically have to have the Zealot ability, and that means it's very bad a lot of the time because you have to vote on your demon a lot of the time, which can be a very difficult pill for the evil team to swallow. And so it ends up creating a situation where the Zealot isn't on a lot of scripts and doesn't get a lot of airtime from an evil team perspective, which is kind of a shame, I think, because I'd like to explore this mechanic. So the way I want to propose tweaking the Zealot is to keep this whole vote for everyone until Final 5 situation, but add an exception. I want the Zealot to pick a player every night the same way that the Butler does, but if that person has their hand up, the Zealot cannot vote. So this creates an exception where the Zealot has to drop on one person's voting pattern during the day. It gives an evil player opportunities to deny being the Zealot. But that person was voting, so I couldn't. It allows you to bluff a Zealot while occasionally doing things that you actually want to do, like not voting on your demon. And it gives opportunities for a true Zealot to actually hide their ability entirely, depending on how active certain people are at voting. And it also offers a thematic benefit, I think. I'm a little confused by the idea of the Zealot as someone who votes for every single person, just kind of this want to watch the world burn mentality. The Zealot as a concept, especially with the Molotov cocktail icon, speaks to, certainly a very angry and kind of revolutionary kind of aesthetic. But I think any of us who spent any time in sort of intense political discourse circles will recognise that those people tend to be the kind of people who are less willing to be part of the big tent. I think there's always somebody who's going to fail the purity test, and that might change daily or weekly who that main character is in that front. But there'll always be somebody who you can't consciously vote with or work together with. So I'd like to incorporate a bit of that antagonism into how the Zealot interacts with a specific other player. And I think that would lead us to a situation where it's more fun to play and to bluff around.
I will say the zealot not fitting in the big tent makes sense because that's a different outside of the big tent.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, that's a townsfolk anyway. I broadly I agree. I think that the zealot, I like what it does for the balance of a game, but the specific interacting with / being the zealot is not the most interesting compared to other characters. Most other characters that are passive or just restrictive, you still can learn stuff from it. So, for example, I don't know, like being the recluse, you don't have anything going on, it's just pure downside, but you can still like weaponize it in an interesting way. The zealot, there's none of that really. The zealot basically exists to put on scripts where it will be difficult to encourage people to execute for no particular reason, just to grease the wheels of voting. And I think it has value from like on a macro level from that. But I do agree that if I draw the zealot, I'm never going to be interested. Like not that I won't be interested in the game, but I'm never going to be like, yay, I'm the zealot. I can't wait to have my hand up on everything. And to be fair, there are certain people who I know do like the zealot for that exact reason. They're like, this has removed a layer of complication from this game, and now I can just lean into the fact that I'm the zealot, have fun with it, and worry about other things. So it's definitely a subjective take. But I do agree that it's on the spectrum of interesting characters. Your one definitely sounds more interesting than the actual version. Possibly more of a pain to deal with in terms of people who raise and drop their hands. Because unlike the butler, you have to exactly mirror what the other person does rather than just, oh, they've dropped, I need to drop. It becomes, oh, they've dropped, I need to raise again. Oh, they've raised, I need to drop again in both directions, which is a slight bit more of a pain. But yeah, otherwise I definitely think your version sounds more interesting.
I'm interested in. So let's say you are this version of the zealot, and you're woken to pick a player. If you're the butler, I think the general strategy is pick a player that you're aligned with. Does that make sense? That you share the same worldviews. You probably think they're good. You think that you can convince them to vote with you on these people. I'm worried that as this version of the zealot, you're almost incentivized to pick an evil player, and then in turn, by picking an evil player, you don't want to tell that evil player such that either you vote on them because they're not voting on themselves, or they vote on themselves so you don't vote on them. So it's almost always a +1 vote on an evil player. Does that make sense?
Yes, I can see how that could happen. I don't know whether it'll be true in practice all the time, obviously. It does still require that player to be nominated. But I think you're right to say that it could be a bit odd. I think that obviously the way that they would interact with their chosen player would be different than the butler most of the time. There might be ways to tweak it so that's not necessarily the case.
I think it's removing. So the downside of the zealot is that it makes evil nominations basically easier to get on the block, in the sense that it's basically +1 vote for evil most of the time. It not always, but like if evil want to, they have an extra vote there that they can use, and that can mess with voting stuff. I think here you're incentivized to pick an evil player such that you're removing that downside from yourself. I don't disagree that I think this makes it a more interesting character rather than one that just sits there with their hand up. I worry it almost strays away too much from that initial vision or like that initial downside.
I guess what it effectively does, assuming no thief or bureaucrat, which, just as a brief aside, bureaucrating or thieving the zealot, always funny.
Yeah.
But assuming nothing like that's in play, you're basically saying choose a player. Between the two of you, you are making one whole zealot, right? Because if they're voting, you're not. If they're not voting, you are. So in that sense, yes, you want to pick someone who you think will be unaligned from you, because you're essentially sort of cancelling each other out in a way.
For voting purposes, like if the person is after you, it's possible that like you then just don't vote at all, in that they have their hand up, you don't. The storyteller passes you, they lower their hand.
I guess on that front, there's actually like I trust most people wouldn't actually bother to do this, but if you wanted to optimize playing against the zealot, you could begin every vote by just like repeatedly raising and lowering your hand and seeing which player is doing the opposite of you.
Oh no, I'm not
And then
suggesting like an optimal play. I'm just suggesting like let's say I'm the zealot and I've chosen Patters and Patters is like, oh don't worry guys, I'll put the 6th vote on myself. And the storyteller's spinning round and it comes to me. Patters has got his hand up. He's ready to be the 6th vote, so I lower my hand. And then of course it comes around to Patters and he does what he always does, and everyone is always surprised, which is that he then lowers his hand, not putting the 6th vote on himself. And
always funny.
it is, yeah. it removes that element of the +1 vote almost.
I mean, I think that's still like it's a relatively slight downside. I think you're still most days. I think early on you're going to get several nominations, and the Zealot will probably still have an impact in terms of getting in its own team's way enough. I think what you mentioned about like seeing where you are in relation to the person you voted. In this situation with Patters going last, you're now, depending on where people are sat, you're creating a situation where actually it doesn't change the way around things go, because you can still have to vote because that person does not have their hand up and then later on they do. That I think can be manipulated by evil to create the +2 or the +1 net, and similarly to go -1. I think it can be played either way depending on seating position.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so as an evil player then who's bluffing this, who would you bluff choosing, I guess? Would you choose players who are building the wrong worlds? Would you bluff choosing players who are building the right worlds?
I mean, so ultimately you're you're trying to create a situation where you don't have to vote on your demon. I think is like that's the biggest problem with bluffing Zealot is that you have to vote for your demon. So I guess you are trying to pick somebody who you think, given the opportunity, would put their hand up on your demon so that you don't have to then add to that noise. So if that's somebody who's pushing information against them, or for whatever reason incentivized to do that, I think it's kind of the same for both teams, right? You're trying to pick somebody who you think is, pushing against your team's best interests, and it's kind of weirdly mirrored in the way that the Zealot already is to bluff or evil. Is like you'll kind of just, regardless, you just have a Zealot of an alignment. Yeah, I do think it would be nice to find like a wording that prevents the, as you suggested, Casey, this mechanical abuse of it. Like the butler, it's not something you can prove. It's just it's a conversation that happens after the day. But it's much harder to stop an entire town of tryhards just doing the Zealot hokey cokey for a minute.
Yeah, but you don't need rules to fix like social problems in Clock Tower, if that makes sense.
I agree. It's just cleaner. It's nicer. It's nicer when it's cleaner.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would say not strictly relevant, but while I'm thinking of funny travellers to interact with the Zealot, I also want to pitch Bone Collector.
That is
so
that
mean.
is funny.
That's so. You don't get told you've been bone collecting.
Oh,
They don't know.
yes, that's very difficult. I think you probably have like Cannibal Butler style. You probably have to be told, right? Because. But imagine waking up to 5 players to a dead player, going, "Pals, we can make one nomination today. Don't screw me."
Imagine just I think we might have stumbled across the first requirement to have a jinx involving a traveller. Sorry, I didn't mean to distract from the Zealot reworking. I was thinking of travellers because of the bureaucrat thief thing.
Maybe I'd love to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'd like to playtest it or something like it, but yeah, I want the Zealot to be fun, and like you say, it's mostly there for script building purposes at the moment. which makes its closest cousin like the Snick, and the Snick is nobody's favourite character either. So give them some help.
I do like being the snitch though, because you get to get the vibe of if people are in double claims, they're probably just good players, which is really freeing.
I don't know. Depends what circles you're in.
I disagree with this point. I disagree with this point. Everyone makes this point, and I make a point as a minion with a snitch in play to go off bluff to try and get into a double claim.
Sure, okay, I'll rephrase. It doesn't make you probably good if you're in a double claim. It makes you less likely to be evil. Like there is a mechanic, like basically categorically people are getting into double claims by choice at that point, if that makes sense.
But yeah, I think I agree with the point that it is like there's like a group of outsiders I like to call like a storyteller outsider, which is like it's a tool for the storyteller, which I think Snitch falls into. Zealot, I think you can argue, falls into. I think Tinker also falls into that, of characters that just...
Yeah, Tinker does not exist because anyone enjoys being the Tinker. Tinker exists so that you don't know what caused all the deaths in BMR. Yeah, that's...
I think that there should be more Clock Tower scripts designed to work with larger player counts, specifically of 13 or more players. So, firstly, what do I mean by a script that's designed to work with larger player counts? What does that look like? I'm going to use TB as an example here. I don't think that TB works above 12 players due to the existence of the Baron, which is not a loud minion in the sense that the Vizier is a loud minion, but it's a loud minion in the sense that its absence is noticed. And when you only have 4 minions on your script, the absence of one minion dictates that all of the other minions must therefore be in play. And I feel like that, for a start, massively closes down Worlds and 15-player games. I also think that the fact that there are only 13 townsfolk and you will usually have 9 in play, potentially you have a 10th with the drunk, means that there's basically one good character available for bluffing, or that's not been given as a bluff that is available for bluffing. Often means that you get evil players caught out in a double claim purely because they can't help but stumble into that double claim. So I think a script that would be built for more players would have certainly more minions, certainly more townsfolk. I don't know if it requires more outsiders. I don't know if it requires more demons. I don't think it requires either of more outsiders or more demons. I think 4 works perfectly well. And I think that I'm aware that, this system comes with some downsides. Mainly, for example, imagine there is a TB that's TB but big for 13 plus players, and racking up potentially between versions of scripts might get tedious. But I think that 15-player games are kind of unloved, but I think 14 is a really fun number to play Clock Tower at. And I want scripts that facilitate that. I believe it was Inch by Patterns, which at one point had like 16 townsfolk on it. Bearing in mind this was a Leviathan script, solo Leviathan, so it was able to work in those 16 townsfolk by removing 3 demons. But I think that it's an unloved space of Clock Tower, and I think that the script is a big, or not necessarily a big part, but certainly a reason for that. And I think that if there were scripts designed for 13, 14, 15 player games, people would enjoy them more.
100% agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is, I think, a space to be explored here that has been opened up by the recent changes to the script tool, which is that the way that it uses space now with multiple columns gives access to a higher possible total of things you can fit on one page at one time, which has historically been the main reason why we haven't seen more experimentation, I believe personally, with bigger character count scripts, because I think I agree with you that is what would be required for like scripts that are designed for 13 minimum. But you can now get those extra townsfolk on there without compromising on the number of demons on the script. And I hope and believe we'll get more people trying that out. I do think it would probably be worth considering whether you change anything beyond just the number of things on the script and what those things are. I think there is an interesting conversation to be had about whether you add in, say, Loric or Fable, depending on how you think it's appropriate. Probably Fabled, I guess, for this purpose, where you add a fourth bluff. I don't think that's unreasonable for certain scripts, to get around, the minion issue.
I really like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of scripts that have larger player counts, or that are built and are used in larger player groups, often have Village Idiot on them, and I wonder if that's related in that it sort of inherently, by its very nature, is kind of, if you squint, adding 2 extra townsfolk onto the script.
Yeah, I definitely feel that as a consideration. I haven't done like any specific script building for large games, but it is always something that you notice, especially when you start, like when you put the drunk on the script, you have to immediately start thinking about, okay, what happens if um, there's also like a vigor mortis or a godfather -1. Like it's very easy to get to situations you didn't plan for, where simply all of the townsfolk are in play, or there's not enough to give out as non-outsider bluffs. And yeah, the village idiot is a big help with that. Um, yeah, I think at the moment, if you were expected to play a script only with big player counts, you would almost certainly put it on there. Now I think with the extra room from the script tool, it's no longer a necessary part, but it definitely speaks to that kind of panic from script writers when you have a certain evil team makeup and you need to make sure you have viable bluffs.
I know this doesn't this definitely doesn't address the entire issue, Nia, because it does nothing whatsoever with minions, and also inherently it adds problems as well as a potential solution. But do you think the Pope helps at all with this?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention the Pope as well. I think it can help with this. I think the Pope allows for both multiple characters to be in play, and also that opens up the bluffing space. It means that you don't get an evil player caught out by, like, I played a game recently that was 15 players, and we caught out an evil player because they were double claiming empath. And if there was a Pope in play, there could be 2 empaths. And that's fine. So I think the Pope helps with the townsfolk part of the issue, but I do think that, for example, if you put, for example, a Vizier on your script, a Vizier is fine in a 12-player game because you know one of the 2 minions. But if you took that same script with the same 4 outsiders and you ran that in a 15-player game and no one was announced as the Vizier on day 1, barring poisoner shenanigans or what have you, that would probably immediately tell you what your 3 minions are. And so I think, as well as increasing townsfolk to open up more bluffing space, I think that minions also need to increase. Just from a perspective of, otherwise you can't put a loud minion on the script. I feel like.
I'd agree with that. I think that I'm not making any aspersions against S&V and BMR because they're both, contrary to what some people say, they are both fantastic scripts. But I do think that it's slightly odd that it's sort of been, those 2 scripts are sort of codified within custom script makers, the idea that the default number should be 4 minions and 4 demons. Because, as you say, like, there will always be, subject to Legion or whatever, there'll always be 1 demon, but there could be 1 minion, 2 minions, 3 minions. I mean, a Little Monster large game, it could be 4 minions. But and usually, to be fair, if people make a Little Monster script, they'll put a 5th minion on for that reason. But it does seem like the default a lot of the time would make more sense if it was 5 and 3.
I often find like that when you do get scripts that have that 5th minion on, it gets very annoying to play them at like 1 minion player counts, where suddenly finding the exact minion is an enormous pain in the backside. And yeah, I think that speaks to like the the lack of elasticity sometimes of what scripts should be played at what counts. I would, I'd like to see more script writers talk about, if applicable, like what group sizes they've play tested scripts with and designed them for. That would be a useful part of the the publicity process for posting and sharing scripts. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Mia, in that like there are just minions that will break if you go up to a 3rd minion. There are scripts that will struggle to do that, but it does go both ways. And in the same way that Team Evil exists to do a sub 7 player count, it's worth thinking about the various graduations and whether there could be room to specialize. I think it's definitely something that's worth exploring.
Do you think, okay, could there be scripts that are for 7 to 9 then, for example? And what would they look like?
I'd be so curious about it, like to
Yeah.
imagine what that would be. Like, I think it would be if nothing else, a really fascinating script writing exercise. Think about what it really narrows down what themes you want to explore, like what mechanics you're trying to blend together. And yeah, I kind of like the notion of like, you pick the idea of like a TB plus a level if you're going to like expand into the 13 plus. Like, I don't think a TB is such a well-honed machine that I don't think that would be the exact script I would turn into a smaller version of itself. But I think for a lot of customs, I often start with me wanting to, when I'm writing a script, I want to explore a particular character or a particular interaction, and boiling it down to like how that would play at a small count, I think can help you really identify like what it is you're actually script writing for in the first place.
Yeah, I think I'd absolutely agree with that. I mean, to use that Vizier example, Mia, if you've got 5 minions or whatever on your script, and then you're playing a 7-player game and someone's announced as the Vizier, suddenly that's quite a lot of information. Especially because oftentimes the minions are the main form of outsider modification as well. Obviously not the only, but oftentimes they're the primary one. And so yeah, I think definitely having scripts that are made with X number of minions in mind, I think would be a very sensible approach.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have definitely found myself in the past like gravitating away from playing a script with like a Vizier or a Psychopath on it if I'm only in a 1 minion situation, just because there is a kind of like, the Vizier's outed. Oh, okay, well, I'll stop thinking about that, because it's kind of disappointment sometimes.
Yeah, I think the main thing you don't want in a game of Clock Tower is for people to not have that uncertainty from the start of day one.
Yeah, it's frustrating from a deduction point of view, and it's also frustrating from an evil perspective, where it's like, well, the impact of my being the Vizier is reduced by the fact that now the good team knows so much about what isn't in play. Yeah, no, I this has been on my to-do list for a long time, Mia, and I'm glad you've reminded me of it, because I'm going to have to actually get around to doing one
I look
myself.
forward to 15-player experiment scripts.
Yeah.
Random question. The answer is probably it's too complicated. Don't bother doing it. But you know how you get board games that sort of like you use these components for 4 players, then add these components in when you've got a 5th player. Could you maybe do that with a script where it's like you unlock these characters when you have at least 13 players?
Ooh.
Yeah, I think if you can like find a script that can handle that elasticity of like working. If you can fine tune, you know exactly what are the things that don't work at the small count but do work at a bigger one. I'd love to see some graduating choices.
Is the real challenge here a script that works as both a teensy all the way through to a 15-player game where every 3 players, 2-3 players, you add like a new townsfolk outside a minion demon kind of thing? How many townsfolk are there on Teensy? 6?
Yes.
So you're probably adding like 3 townsfolk, 1 outsider, 1 minion, 1 demon, something like that.
It's 13 on a full size script usually, so you probably can't have it at the exact same number each time, but maybe you can if you know maybe you can do slower than 13.
Maybe if you do 4-3-3 for the townsfolk, so you add 4 when you go to 7 players, you add 3 when you go to 10 players, you add 3 when you go to 13.
Well, having said that, I mean, part of the reason that the default script size is 13 townsfolk is because it can script up to 15, right? There's actually nothing saying that has to be the ceiling if you are just playing this version of the script at 10 to 12, right? Maybe
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be 13.
That's true. Yeah, I feel like 13 is actually a lot of townsfolk at a 12-player game, because there's 7 in play, which means that by default, which means that there are 6 not in play. Like, why is the demon given bluffs? It's a 50-50 almost.
Well, if you are listening to this, the Duchess's dinner party is very excited to announce their first script building competition. No, I genuinely, if people are listening to this and are inspired, I'd love to see what they come up with, because it's an unexplored space, I think.
There's loads of design space here.
I feel like there's I'm really stuck on that idea of like unlocking a script. Is there like a legacy or something in there? Like a legacy?
I think there'd be such like interesting like meta like possibilities. Well, so let's say you've been playing the 7 to 9 version of the script, and then someone else has walked in, and now okay, well we can go up to 10 players now. So the storyteller now gets access to these extra tools. Are they going to put them in because you're quote unquote supposed to at this range? Don't know.
I guess the downside of this is, does it run the risk of saying that the Vizier is a character for 10 players and above, and like locking that out almost?
I mean, like I say, this is kind of how I play already.
Yeah, like I think by default it kind of is. But you definitely can build a script that's designed for a lower player count where the Vizier is the sort of the intended 1 minion. But I think if you just take a script that's designed to be usually run with 2 minions, because sort of, you know, the official streams have kind of ingrained in people that 12 is the quote-unquote correct number. If you take a script like that and then just play it with 1 minion and make them the Vizier, I think it is worse. But I think you could definitely make a script intending to have Vizier as the 1 minion and have the intrigue come from the other characters in it.
I mean, I think one word we should definitely make in this exact context is alchemist. Like, that is how you can build scripts that allow these minions to have space in their small accounts and be interesting, right? Is the possibility that they could be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially in an era where, for the time being, we're getting fewer and fewer playable token releases while TPI works on, future-based scripts. Given that, especially as somebody who admits that they're part of the problem, there are a lot of custom scripts out there. I think it would be a great opportunity for the community to explore different ways of using what we have, rather than generating 10,000 more 13.444.
I look forward to you making the radio edit and extended cut versions of your scripts.
Oh, that's a fun way to refer to them, yeah.
Yeah, there's some fun thought exercises to be done.